In this video, I'd like to talk about what the Nazis' main ideas were in 1933. So what were their main ideas when Hitler had just become Chancellor in January of 1933? Now this is a thing that actually a lot of students and a lot of adults find really quite confusing, because they find it quite confusing that ordinary Germans would vote for a party who were outwardly racist and had some really quite horrible ideas. And I think it's really important, before we even look at those ideas, to look at the context of Germany in 1933. Because when you understand the context of Germany in 1933, that question slightly makes more sense. Now there are four aspects to this. Firstly, you need to understand that the Germans had only relatively recently lost the First World War. So in 1918 they lost the First World War and they were bitterly humiliated as a result. Secondly, as a result of losing the First World War, the Allies sat down in Paris at the Treaty of Versailles and they put restrictions on Germany. Germany was forced to sign a document saying that they were entirely to blame for the war, and as a result of that they took away a lot of German land. They heavily restricted their military, so their army was only allowed to be 100,000 men, and they put massive financial burdens onto Germany with a bill of £6.6 billion in reparations. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, at the end of the 1920s, at the start of the 1930s, Germany then went into a massive Great Depression. There were huge unemployment rates, large numbers of people were starving, there was massive poverty on a scale that never had been seen before. In addition to that, the Weimar government that were ruling Germany at the time weren't doing a brilliant job. So you have to understand the context of Germany at this time was depressed, humiliated, embarrassed and poor. And it was in that context that people saw the Nazi ideas, thought they were a good thing and voted for them. So let's look at what those Nazi ideas were. Now I'm going to just summarise the main 10 ideas that I think it's important you understand. I'm going to go through one by one and then we'll recap at the end. Firstly, they wanted to scrap the Treaty of Versailles. So the document that harshly restricted them following the First World War, and it restricted their land, their military and their economy. The Nazis wanted to get rid of it. Unsurprisingly, that was hugely popular. Their second main idea was that they wanted the German people to fight for a German word called Lebensraum, and we're going to use a lot of German words in the next 5-10 minutes, and they wanted to fight for Lebensraum. Now the easiest definition of what Lebensraum means is living space or living room, and Germany wanted to take the land in the east. They wanted to take that land so they could grow food, so they could have space to grow, so they wanted to take other countries' land for their own. The third thing that the Nazis wanted for everybody was Brot und Arbeit. Really simply, again, let's define those two words. They wanted to give people bread and they wanted to give people work. And they promised that for all unemployed Germans. If you imagine that this is a time of the Great Depression, funnily enough, that was also hugely popular. The fourth thing they wanted to do is they wanted to build something called nationalism. Now the easiest way of understanding what nationalism is it's a bit like patriotism, but taken to the extreme level. So the Nazis believed that Germany should be run by Germans for Germans. They believed that any foreign influence should be removed from society. And they included in that Jewish people, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And again, in that context of the Allies or foreign nations putting severe restrictions on Germany, you can see why that might have been popular. Even though with our modern eyes, most people don't like the idea of nationalism, actually, in a time in 1933, you can see why that might have been appealing. The fifth thing they wanted to do was destroy Marxism. Now, Marxism is a type of communism, and I'm sure you might know that there was a very famous communist revolution in Russia in 1917, and the Nazis were really opposed to any of the Marxist ideas. They didn't want a similar revolution happening in Germany that had happened in Russia, and they wanted to destroy Marxism. The other reason they wanted to destroy Marxism is they wrongly associated Marxism with Jewish ideas, and they thought that The Bolshevik Party, which were the Marxist communist party that were ruling Russia, were really dominated by Jews. That wasn't true, but they told people that. Sixth, they wanted to strengthen central government. Local government in Germany at this point, in early 1933, had a lot of power. The Nazis believed that the local government should have less power and that the central government should have more power to deal with the problems that Germany was facing. Seventh, as I've already mentioned, the Nazis were highly anti-Semitic. They hated Jewish people. They saw Jews as Untermenschen, which is a word they used which meant subhumans. They blamed Jews for the loss of the First World War in 1918. They blamed Jews for the Communist Revolution in 1917. All of that was complete rubbish, but they were spreading these ideas. Now again, in the context of 1933, a time when everyone was facing immense problems, they basically blamed all of those problems on the Jews. They scapegoated them. That's really awful, but you can again understand to a certain extent why some people were brought into this idea. Their eighth big idea was they wanted to nationalise important industries. Services such as the supply of electricity, water and railways they thought should be provided by the government for the good of the nation. So rather being run by independent companies that would make profit, all those big services should be run by the government for the people. 9. They believed in Aryan supremacy. Now again, this is a term that we're going to come back to a lot of different times in these videos, but the easiest way of describing it is that Aryans were Northern Europeans, and they saw these Aryans as the true Germans, and they believed that Aryans were Übermenschen, or superhuman. Now I think there's a big misconception that thinks that Aryans are all blonde hair and blue-eyed. They are not. Aryans mean true Germans. Now there is a subset of that true German in the Nazi ideas that had blonde hair and blue eyes, but that does not mean that they didn't think other people were Aryans too, but they thought that those Northern Europeans, true Germans, should be the ones that are ruling Germany. And their last big idea was that they wanted to improve education. They saw that education was crucial to improving the economy, and they believed that an improved education system would mean people would work more efficiently and make Germany strong again. Now those 10 ideas that you can see on the screen there, lots of them would have been very popular, and some of them would have been less popular, but maybe people turned a blind eye. Some of those ideas that you can see on the screen there are highly racist. But in a time of depression, in a time of when Germany was humiliated, you can to some extent understand why some Germans decided to ignore those. Now I'm not saying that's right, in fact I find it kind of appalling that they did, but you can slightly see why. And it's those big ideas that really the Nazis use as the foundation for how they decide to change Germany in the next 12 years. And that's what we're going to look at in future videos.